Bulavinaka, Fiji, and a warm welcome to Speak Your Mind. I'm Louise Kaunisela, and my guest today is Karen Walsh, a psychologist, specialist in leadership and people development, business advisor, international conference speaker, and also executive coach. And she's been working in Fiji for 10 years for some companies like RBF, Ministries, Vinod Patel, and Westpac, for example. She has a long background in working with women and domestic violence, and in 2005 helped the Australian government set up the 1-800 toll-free line and spent a year training 900 counsellors on the line. A warm welcome, Karen Walsh, to Speak Your Mind.
Well, Vanaka, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. It's wonderful to be here.
Great. Now, I spoke about how you have a long history with domestic violence. But first of all, you say you're passionate about women. Why, Karen?
I think it's a whole long, real thing about my life. I've always worked with women. I've always coached women. I've always trained women. And I think that women have so much to offer and so much that they can contribute to the world that sometimes I actually don't think that they realize the true value that they have.
That's so true.
So I sort of thought to myself, well, I have a lot of knowledge around this and I'm luckily skills. And I thought I would actually try as much as I possibly can to help women around the world.
Oh, it's so nice talking to you. I mean, I just pick up from you that you have a wonderful energy. You are a very happy person, and it's catchy. I mean, but for you to be working in a place like domestic violence, it must have been really hard for you because, I mean, to see the reality of what women go through, I mean, in the world around, it's not only in Fiji, but how bad is domestic violence in Fiji?
Look, I think domestic violence is sadly a problem around the world. Domestic violence, by definition, is the power and control of one person over the other. I might also say right now that domestic violence happens both ways. Even though it's 4-1 men on women, you also get women who do perpetrate domestic violence. I need to say that at the outset.
Yes.
In Fiji, my understanding from your Minister of Women, Poverty Alleviation and Children is that it's sitting at about 64% right now. And 64% is extraordinarily high per capita. Even though Fiji is a small country, per capita, it's very, very high. And it creates a lot of problems, not only for, obviously, women and families, children, but for the economy, for the country overall. And I think it's something that really needs to be very, very rapidly looked at and dealt with because it's becoming an increasing problem in many organizations and also countries around the world.
I see. So, I mean, you've had experience as well in Australia. You trained 900 counselors, and you must have, I mean, even in Fiji, you've seen how bad it is. And what do you think can be done about it?
Look, I think that there's many things that can be done, Louise, but I honestly believe that, domestic violence is very multi-layered. It's very complex. So to say, well, we're just going to go and educate people and stop domestic violence, it's not going to happen that way. Culturally, historically, politically, religiously, there's so many things that divide the genders. And ultimately, in some cultures, with respect to overseas cultures, women are seen as commodities, possessions.
Yes.
So if they say what they're not supposed to, or the male of the house says that they shouldn't be behaving in a way, then it's stopped abruptly. So there's a lot that can be done. First and foremost, legislation against any form of domestic violence with some measures around consequences. So if you do perpetrate domestic violence, then there's got to be a consequence to that. So legislation,
Right.
certainly education of young men and young girls at school with a focus on men and how to treat women well, your mothers, your grandmothers, your sisters, and also I think communities, where communities in villages in Fiji and in communities and in organizations, in families, that we talk about respectful behavior towards both genders and also the ability to really try and work problems out. So, often it's around frustration and around often booze, substance abuse. So I think it's a long time thing that we have to think about, but more strategies, more ways forward, more education, more legislation to start.
Yes, I mean, for a woman going through domestic violence, it's an awful thing. I mean, it's very sad. I mean, they sometimes feel trapped in the relationship. I mean, sometimes you see them, getting bashed up. What are the reasons for this that they just can't get away?
I think there's many, but in my experience of working in this field for so long, the key things would be, number one, that she doesn't have the means, so she might not have the finances to get away.
Yes.
And therefore, better the devil I know than the one I don't, so I stay.
Right.
The other reason that she would leave, if she has a reason, largely in my experience, are children. So often if I'm working with women and they say, but I want to stay, I love him, even though he hits and hurts me, the problem is that children often get killed in the process.
I mean, it just happened this year for us, the poor little baby, only 4 months old. I mean, the man threw a concrete brick, aiming that brick at his wife, and then it hit the poor child.
And it happens a lot of the time. So that's one of the reasons that often will get them going. But what keeps them there is better the devil I know than the one I don't, a lack of money, a lack of support. So if I go, where do I go and who do I go to? Although what I love about Fiji is that it's very community minded. So they could maybe go back home to the village or, go back to their family. But that's also complex because villages are people, we are a collective people.
Yeah.
We live together. So if a woman and her children does go back to the village, then it's kind of everybody gets involved in it, and it's more collective and can be quite difficult. But I think also I often get well, I love him. I've always loved him. And
She
I say, but
thinks she
hold
loves
on.
him, maybe.
Well, I say, well, he's just broken your nose. How can you love somebody who breaks your nose? And she'll say, well, he's my husband. And of course, could also be things like religion, till death us do part. So it's very complex. It's money, it's faith, married to death us to part. It's not knowing any better. I mean, some women, frankly, Louise, have been living in toxic relationship for so long that they no longer recognize that they're living in a relationship that doesn't work. It's become their normal.
True.
And therefore they continue their normal. And most of the time it's when I question about the safety of children that potentially we can move her over that.
Yes.
But not always. So there are many reasons why she stays.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about how children, they're the ones that have to suffer, going through all the domestic violence. And you even have men who grow up and talk about their experience as a child, having a mother who was, viciously beat up because she wouldn't be listening to her man.
Yeah, there's a lot of studies around the impact of domestic violence or domestic abuse on children, and some of those are around things like the psychological impact. Lots of children turn to depression, anxiety, a sense of powerlessness because I can't stop what's going on. There's a lot of fear in the family. Often you'll find that those children don't perform well at school. They become more reserved and introverted. Medically, they could get regular headaches, backaches. Also socially, they no longer they could be quite outgoing as children, but they no longer come out of their shell and play at school or, are heard in the playground because they almost it's like they're withdrawing back into their shell. So there's so many negative effects of domestic violence on children and, of course, death.
Exactly. On Speak Your Mind, Gold FM, only the classic hits. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, only the classic hits. My guest, Karen Walsh, and she has, a huge experience working with women. And, you saying about how children, they get withdrawn at school. They don't, mix around with their friends because of the fact that they're not happy. And everything, obviously, at home, you should be happy. I mean, why would you want your children to, go through all that horrible stuff? But anyway, now women and managing stress. I believe you're very good in this area as well. So you might like to tell us more.
So I think it's a really important point, Louise, because there's so many things that women do. I mean, when we talk about gender inequality, which is a whole subject on its own, but women basically carry the load. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to men.
Okay.
But most women are working. We work at work, we work at home. So we go home, we cook, we clean, we pick up the kids, we do their homework, we help with our mothers, we help with our fathers. And I remember I read this beautiful, beautiful saying by the Dalai Lama that the world will be saved by women. And I thought that was very interesting. So when I talk about stress, women carry a huge load.
Yes.
And therefore, because of the load that they carry, and that doesn't mean men don't carry a load, but we carry a larger load because of the reasons I've explained.
Yes.
Therefore, it means that as women, we need to be very, very conscious of how we deal with our stress. You know, we've got a heavy burden, we've got a heavy load, and I think I'm very, very strong around how we look after our health.
Okay.
And what I find both in Australia being my first country and Fiji my second country, or maybe it's the other way around, I think I'm here more than there, but I think that as women we don't always look after ourselves well. And what I mean by that is we're so busy looking after everybody else
So true.
that we come last.
Yes.
And it's a great question when I'm speaking at a conference, I ask this question. How many of you ladies wake up in the morning so tired and your bones burn and you think, oh my gosh, I've got to get up again? And then how many of you drag yourself throughout the day and you can't wait to go back to home, your best friend being your bed? So you wake up aching, you go through your day slow and you can't wait to get to bed. That to me is a life that's not purposeful for women.
No.
So it's about really thinking about what do I need to do differently to manage my stress? And there's many things we can do.
All right. So maybe you might like to explain one of the few many that we
Okay.
can do.
One of the things I think is really important, and this is not Karen Walsh talking, this is international research since the dawn of mankind or womankind, is looking after our bodies. So, for example, regular exercise. So 3 to 4 times a week, 30 to 40 minutes a time where you get your cardiovascular happening, but we don't generally do that. So, for example, you know, making sure we exercise, we keep our endorphins happy, our weight down, our bodies happy.
Because exercise is really good for stress as well, I
Well,
believe.
it is. And
Yes.
also for anxiety, for depression.
Yes, anxiety, depression as well.
So many things for women. The other thing is obviously to drink water, to keep the alcohol, the grog down, to make sure that we, if we can, 8 hours sleep a night, eat well. So
Okay.
vegetables, you know, and also the other thing with eating is, because I know that my Fijian family tend to eat a lot, is to have smaller portions.
Yes.
And generally if you have meat no larger than the palm of your hand.
Okay.
So the other thing is to have lots of family time, which I think we do well in Fiji,
Yeah.
but to connect with people, because life and women and men are all about connections. And then the last thing I think is some downtime,
Yeah.
like just downtime for us, and to delegate. Reduce the expectations that we have of ourselves and delegate little chores to your 10-year-old son.
Right.
You
Why
know,
not?
Exactly. Get your daughter to maybe do the cooking twice a week,
Exactly.
just to take the load off.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And what about for the mind? You know, how some people have that anxiety and depression. Sometimes they need to get treated, right? They need to go to hospitals. But if it's just, what about anxiety, depression? How do we control that?
Okay, so I mean, if you've got sort of clinical anxiety or clinical depression, which is another level, which might need medication, it might need a psychiatrist, but not always.
Okay.
But if you're talking about just the general life around anxiety and depression, I think it's sometimes we all get a little bit anxious about life. And life doesn't work for us all the time. Maybe sometimes we get a bit low, depression.
Yes.
But one of the best ways, I think, in terms of calming the mind could be meditation, learning how yoga,
Okay.
learning how to have like a calming thing in your mind. So, for example, I stress a lot when I fly, which sounds insane because I'm flying all the time. But it's only when I had turbulence. So when I was coming here the other day and it was turbulent, I'm saying I'm closing my eyes. I'm just saying, so I'm breathing very deeply and I'm saying, just calm, stay calm, Karen, stay calm. So I think it's about being able to think in a calm way, control your breathing,
Yes.
and also to really challenge what your thoughts are. Because quite often, if we're used to thinking in a negative way or in a stressful way, that's where our thoughts go.
Yeah, that's so true. When you say the negative, that has a lot to do with your mind not being, you know, in a good state. When
Yes.
you're negative, if you hear someone, you know, always talking negative, you can tell, I'm sure, Karen,
Yes.
that person is suffering from probably anxiety and depression.
Or they could just be somebody who tends to think about life in a negative way that isn't necessarily making them anxious or depressed, but that's
Okay.
the way they see life. And what I know from hanging around people in my past who are negative, they're exhausting.
They truly are. I mean, no one wants to be around someone who's negative,
No.
okay? It just drains you.
Exactly. I want
Yeah.
the positive people, you know. I love
Happy people.
the can-do attitude, you know.
Right.
Anything like
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
I think that depression, anxiety, it has different levels.
Right. So it's such a good point that you have to find something to do to take away that way you're thinking. Maybe if you like music, listen to music then.
Well, there's lots of things you can do. Obviously, listen to music. Some people pray.
Yes,
Some people
pray.
write. Some people read. I think that the ability to move from negative to positive thinking, there's actually skills you can learn. So that
Okay.
let's just say the very first thing I say is, oh, typical. Here I am. It's a rainy day. I hate my life. Right? Negative.
Yes.
You could turn it around, but this takes practice, Louise. It doesn't
Yes.
happen overnight. And you could say, oh, wow, it's raining again today. How fantastic, because it's going to be great for the gardens and I can wear my new outdoor shoes and I'm so lucky to be alive. Thank you, God. Vinaka vakalevu.
There you go.
Change your thinking. You change your life.
Yeah, and for some, maybe they could do it, very quickly, but for some, we have to keep reminding them.
Or they have to keep reminding
Oh,
them.
yeah, or you just have to remind yourself.
There's a good tip I can quickly give the listeners or the watchers is that if you take an A4 piece of paper and on the left-hand side you write all your negative thoughts.
Okay, that's
And
nice.
on the right-hand side you write positive thoughts that would be in response to a negative thought. So let's just say here you write, I am fat. Right, which is very uncomplimentary about yourself. A more positive thing is, I'm a little overweight, but I can lose it.
Yes.
So notice that the one is just negative, but the other one gives you opportunities and possibilities
Yeah, I mean, that's...
to do something about that.
Yes, that's so true. I like it. I have to do that. Yes, so talking about, what about becoming a resilient woman, okay? Bouncing forward in the face of life's adversities. I mean, some women go through very bad things in their lives, but, actually, we'll have to talk about that when we come back, okay? On Gold FM, this is Speak Your Mind. Thank you a lot for your company. And we're back on Speak Your Mind. Gold FM, only the classic hits. My guest, Karen Walsh, and giving us nice tips on, how to overcome the negative thoughts with positive, which is very important. And, Karen, we actually have a caller on the line, and maybe she wants to say something. You might like to put the headphones on so you can hear what she has to say. This is Kat of Nandi. Hello.
Oh, Bula.
Bula Vinaka. So, yes, do share with us what you want to say, Catherine.
Well, Karen, when you get depressed, how do you get your mojo? Your mojo, your up and go going.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Catherine. The reason why I say that is because it's very difficult to get positive and optimistic if you're struggling, let's say, with clinical depression. So clinical depression is a disorder which generally is treated with medication. And it's if you don't have the medication and if you are clinically depressed, which some of us are, and often it's a pre-genetic factor, it's very difficult to find your mojo when you're struggling with that all the time. And if you do get the medication and you're able to then take that medication regularly, then you'll find that generally the depression eases off and your moods tend to be a little bit more consistent. When you've got that, it's more easy to be able to think in a more positive way. However, if you've got depression that's not a clinical depression, it's just that life is difficult for you, and at times you really find it hard to get up, I think the important thing is to ask yourself, what is it that's going on in my life? So what is causing that sense of lowness for me? What is causing that depression? I'm a very big believer, Catherine, in it's very difficult to solve something unless we understand it. Only when we understand it, I believe, in all my years of doing the work I'm doing, can we do something about it. So, for example, if you say to yourself, if I say to myself, well, I'm really fat, right? I'm really overweight. And I say, well, I don't know why I'm overweight, but I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing, although it makes me so miserable. If I take a step back and say, okay, I need to watch my diet, I need to increase my exercise, I need to watch my sleep. And if you're able to do that and then you see some results, then generally you start feeling more in control, more powerful around what you're doing. So in
well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm actually very skinny.
Yeah. Okay, so it could be anything else. I mean, the question is, why is it that you get low? What is that depression about? Is it lifestyle?
I had 2 strokes.
Yeah.
2 high blood pressure.
So it's medical
and,
issues.
Minor strokes.
Yeah.
I had double vision for a couple of weeks, so you can't see, as you know.
Yeah.
And I couldn't walk properly.
So it's been a really
And
difficult.
but I've tried Prozac
Yeah.
years ago in New Zealand, and I tried, is it Arapax?
Yes, Arapax. It's an SSRI.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were giving them away free. I think the doctors were, just giving them to hand out.
How long were you on them for, Catherine?
Oh, 3 days. I couldn't. They made me feel really weird, and I probably drink too much vodka.
Okay, vodka
Well,
and tablets like
excess,
that don't go well. Just a quick thing, and I appreciate that I'm under time here, but if you are going to be on medication like that, it generally takes 2 weeks to kick in. So if you're on it for 3 days, even though you might have felt a bit weird, I'm not suggesting those were the ones to continue with. You could have changed brand, but don't give up. 3 days is not enough for you to feel the effects of that. But
I felt wonky.
Yeah.
I felt, strange.
you overcome that though. But I think look at other things that bring you joy in your life and try and do more of those things: grandchildren, children, friends, and try and bring yourself out
I've
of
got
that.
no family here.
Oh, that makes it harder.
Okay, Catherine. Well, I hope that
Yeah.
Karen's helping you
Yeah,
out. Okay,
that
thank
was
you
good.
very much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome,
Thank you,
Catherine.
All right, so that's Catherine for us, and thank you very much, Karen, for giving her a piece of advice, because sometimes it feels like when you're just stuck in a hole and you can't get out, but you need to find that power within you.
Yes, very often, if we can.
Yeah, if we can, because sometimes it's so hard.
It is. But often it's other people around us who love us, who can help us.
Yes.
And it doesn't necessarily mean people who are family, could be friends, could be people at work who care for us. I think there's a lot of help generally around many people that sometimes we don't look at in the moment of our distress or our difficulty.
Yes, because loneliness as well has a big part, I believe, to getting depressed.
I think it's a really important point. You know what's really interesting, Louise, is I can see people who are surrounded by villagers. Everybody knows them and they've got everybody around them, and yet they feel so lonely. Okay. And often people say to me, why is that? And I always say, I think it's the power and the connection. If you've got a woman who's not feeling connected to people around her, even though there's lots of them,
Yes.
then I feel often we feel both alone and lonely. So it's about trying to re-engage with the connection so that we feel as if we're part of something. Human beings are animals and we live in social groups. Like
Yes.
monkeys, with respect.
Okay.
And monkeys live in groups. Monkeys will never be alone. So that if we're taken away from the people that actually keep us going and to whom we feel connected, then we're going to feel alone and lonely, which ultimately can then affect our health, our depression, our mood, anxiety, and just general outlook on life.
Yeah, it's all about just being positive, even if you are lonely.
Sometimes
admit,
easier than-
it's always
Easier
easier
said than
said
done.
than done. That's true. But anyway, we'll go to the resilience. What does it mean? Like I said earlier, before we went to the break, becoming a resilient woman. Being faced with a terrible, just say for example, a terrible relationship. Being stuck in a relationship for probably, say, 10 years, and the man dumps you and your children. So maybe give us some advice on how to get out of that.
Okay, first question was, what was resilience? Well, resilience is essentially, the definition is the ability to recover, to come back after a life, difficulty. So essentially the definition is resilience is the ability to bounce back. I like the definition that resilience is the ability to bounce forward. And I think essentially what it is that there's a lot of, issues that we all face in life. I haven't yet met somebody with a perfect life, but there's been a lot of research on things like tsunamis, world wars, hurricanes, and the whole focus has been on what makes resilient people, what makes resilient communities. And I often believe, and in fact I'll say this until the day I die, resilience is about our ability to think in a positive way. And I always say, and I'm saying this to viewers and listeners, when we have life difficulties, I want you to ask yourself 4 words. How can I recover? That's it. because, you might struggle for a little bit. So if he's left you for another woman with the children, of course it's agonizingly painful. Why wouldn't it be? You had your hopes on this person. You're going to stay with them until we got old and grandparents together. But at the end of the day, you are a worthy woman. You're a beautiful woman. You've got so much going for you. It might take you a while to recover. It might take you a while to come back. But ultimately, remember that there's nothing that you can't do if you truly want to do it. Remember that you've got people around you to support you and who love you. And if you truly want to do it, you get out there and you recover because you deserve to.
Yes, I mean, it takes a lot. Like you said, it's much easier said than done. But you have to find that power to change your life. On Gold FM, this is Speak Your Mind. We'll be back in a moment. This is Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, only the classic hits. Lovely to have your company. Thank you so much. And my guest, Karen Walsh, giving us a lot of encouragement, which is something that we really need as, women, having to juggle the household, having to go to work even these days. I know in the past, mostly men used to work and women used to stay home. But now it's, women have to work to earn money as well. But we were talking about resilience and how you have to find that power in you. You said that you're beautiful, you can do it. But some women, they just can't find the energy or even the hope to get out. Why is that?
I think it's many things. I think sometimes that we have been raised in environments where maybe our true worth was not really realized. Maybe we were bullied at school. Maybe people said, horrible things to us. I think that very often our ability to be resilient is something that we can be taught from the home. Not always. There's always this question, so are you born resilient or do you learn resilient?
Oh, okay. So I think you learn resilience.
Well, I think that you do. I mean, that's my sense. But what I would say, in the work I do is I always think you can learn resilience, but there might be some of them who are born with resilience. And I'm thinking about a friend of a family who had a very, very difficult situation. Actually, her brother passed away. He suicided, and it was very, very tragic. But to see this young female just really, recover was fantastic, and she hadn't learned that. So we either born with it, or we can learn it, or both. So, but I think, if we've got a history of always feeling not good about ourselves, that we haven't got a great body image, we don't think we're intelligent. How many times do I have women telling me, oh, Karen, I could never get that job. I'm not smart enough. So already that thinking is, I'm not going to try. Yes. So I think you're right. It's about coming back to what I said earlier. It's to actually take a step back and look at what you do well. And again, I gave you the example of the piece of paper. So what would be a really great thing is for you to take a book or a piece of paper and write down all the things which are your strengths. Because very often, Louise, we don't think about the strengths. Sometimes we think about the things that we don't do well, like I'm not fast at work, or I don't run fast, or I don't think very clearly. We're good at saying what we don't do well. But I think we need to really balance it up with what do we do well. And I really like to, whenever I'm working with women, is to encourage women to think about, there are so many things you do well. There are so many things that make you unique. There are so many things that make you beautiful and special. And the most important thing is that you have to learn to believe that. Because if you don't believe it, tell me who will.
Yeah, true.
And there's a great example. I'll give you one in business. So I was working with this beautiful young woman and a job came up. And I said to her, so go for the job. And she said, oh, no, I'll never get that. I said, why won't you get that? She said, I'm not smart enough. I said, how come you're not smart enough? She said, oh, no, I'll leave it to the gentleman to get. And I said, oh, no, you won't. You give that job a go. So we got her resume together and I gave her a bit of coaching, and she was very unsure the day that she went for the interview. Anyway, they called her back for the second interview.
There you go.
And by that stage, she and I had done a bit more work, and I was just, getting her to be stronger. And by the time she went into that interview, she absolutely nailed the interview. She got the job. And it was just fantastic because she said, I never thought I could. I said, that's the point. You need to start thinking, ladies, that you can, not
Yes.
you can't.
Yeah, my grandmother used to say, no such thing as can't.
I would like your grandmother. She would be my kind of girl.
Yeah, I mean, I always remember that. No such thing as can't,
Exactly.
you know.
And the other thing I think women don't do particularly well is that generally in work, a man will go and ask for a raise. Now, boss, I'm very, very gifted and talented. I need another $20,000 of Vinaka Baka level. And he'll get it probably, or maybe negotiate 10. She will never go and ask for more money. She will wait until the money is given to her, and then she'll be very gracious. I mean, obviously not all women are like this. You know, I'm speaking the general here.
Yeah.
But overall, we don't ask, we wait. And I think that that's something that comes back to what I was saying. We need to start to value ourselves and put a price on the work that we do and not be prepared to take second class. In Australia, if I have Ravi sitting next to me and we've got the same qualifications, or I might indeed be better qualified, but Ravi's a male, I'm a female, on general, Ravi will get 17.3% more money than I do.
Yes.
Now, how does that work, tell me, in terms of gender equality? And, you know, we talk about all of these historical and cultural things. I think one of the things I was going to say, and I think I mentioned it to you earlier, Louise, and I'll quickly say this. It's one thing for we women to be in organizations and to be, you know, given great jobs, etc. But I think we also need to step up as women. I think we need to start taking responsibility for claiming our lives and for really valuing who and what we are and what we can contribute, and then going out and getting it in the nicest way possible.
Right. Oh, perfectly said, Karen. In the nicest way possible.
But meaningful way.
In a meaningful way. That's always how it should be done.
Exactly. Exactly.
When you want to get a point across, you don't want to be, you know, saying it in, you have to say it in a very nice way.
Well, I always say this to women when I'm working with them. Don't get aggressive. If you're angry, don't get aggressive. You might be angry. It's at that time you do nothing. You walk away and you calm down, right? You might give, my rule is 24 hours. Because when I come back, then that's a tip, 24 hours. Generally, you'll start feeling things differently the next day. So calm down and then try and resolve it. But if you are in a meeting, for example, and I don't think enough women speak up in meetings, that's my observation. If you are in a meeting and somebody says something angry that makes you angry, don't address anger with your anger. Because anger, and I can promise you, Louise, you will lose.
True.
So we got to get smart.
Yes.
We've got to be assertive. And we come back in the nicest way possible, firm and fair.
That is so true. That's
Yes.
excellent advice. So I'm just sorry. I know about we've spoken about resilience, but I wanted to go back quickly on domestic violence. You know how sometimes a man has probably just come back from a big drink up, and you're at home and you're really angry. You probably throw a few punches at the same time. At your man, and he's coming. Drunk. I mean, he's not been violent or anything. Do you think it's a good advice if a woman could take a different approach?
Without a doubt. It's one of the things I've been teaching for years. And with those 900 counselors, I taught them this day in, day out. And this is the basic thing. If your husband or your wife,
Right.
your husband comes home on a Friday night and he's angry and he's grogged up or whatever, I think one of the key things I teach women is don't make the situation worse. Even though you might be angry and frustrated, never ever provoke the argument, particularly if there's a pattern of abuse and you know that should you be the one who's actually provoking him, like where have you been and you've been drinking again and where's the money?
Oh, you idiot. And then
And once you get into that, Louise, I can tell you something, there's a one-way corridor and it's not good.
Yeah.
So what I teach with women is learn to be smart, ladies. Learn to read the situation. Even if you're angry, manage your anger. Go next door, go to your sister, go to your mom, take the kids. Don't stay there and become part of the problem. Because if you stay there and you start arguing and giving him a hard time, you become part of the problem, not the solution. And so if you are in a situation where it tends to be like that when he's been drinking or whatever, my advice is think before you say anything. Be calm. It's always about that whoever is calm wins the day.
That's so true.
And I teach one of the things in Australia and in many countries actually is that to give her a safety plan.
Okay.
And a safety plan essentially is where she has a situation where she's got a backup of maybe a suitcase. She's got 2 kids. She's got some clothing in there. She's got some money in there. She's got official documents in there. And should she have to leave quickly for the sake of her life and those of her children, she grabs a bag or goes, or she keeps the bag at somebody's house and she goes there, so that there's something that she can hold on to when she needs to.
Yeah.
Or he, I mean, as I said earlier, domestic violence goes both ways, although it is 4-1.
It certainly does. I mean, because even if you do hassle your man, and then you will become a part of the problem, and you could even die. I mean,
Well, exactly. I mean, there's a 64% of, in terms of women in Fiji who's, I've got the statistics here, which is that 64% of women who have been in intimate relationships in Fiji, of that 61 have been physically assaulted, and of that 34 have been sexually abused. So those are very high statistics per capita in a small country. So I do think it is obviously about him or the perpetrator not having those behaviours, learning to treat their woman with respect and etc. But I do think it is about her learning to not provoke the situation.
yes,
Because
I
by
mean, for
provoking,
her own good.
well, and for the children.
And the children, obviously. But yeah, you just have to think smart.
I wanted to just also add one thing which the listeners and might actually be interested in. I use the word survivors. So in domestic violence, they often call about the victims. If you are a domestic violence in a domestic violence situation, and I was not that long ago, very, very tragically, where he killed her, she was a victim. So there was no surviving for her. She died, and that was the end of the story.
Yeah.
However, if you are a woman who's in a relationship and you survive, i.e. you don't actually pass away, please Lord, I call those people survivors because they are surviving a situation
Yes.
that could potentially end their lives and those of their children. However, in order to continue to survive and not to become a victim, they need to do all the things that I'm talking about today, to learn the signs, learn the strategies, leave the relationship temporarily or permanently if it's an abusive relationship. And I honestly take my hat off to those women because they've survived a very difficult situation.
Yeah.
What I often find interesting is that a lot of those women go back into that relationship, which then the cycle keeps on going round
Vicious
and round.
cycle, I would say,
Yeah,
Karen.
yeah.
On Speak Your Mind, Gold FM, only the classic hits. Thank you a lot for your sweet company. This is Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, only the classic hits. I'm Louise and my guest, Karen Walsh. I see the phone ringing. Let me just see if there's someone who wants to discuss with us something. Good afternoon, Gold FM. How may I help you?
Yes, good afternoon, Louisa.
Good afternoon. Would you
Yes,
like to say something to Karen?
No, yes, I just want to thank Karen for.
Yes?
I just want to thank her for first of all, I want to thank you, Louisa and Karen, for the program today.
Oh.
And it was very inspiring, especially for domestic violence.
You are so welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, my dear. So that's really good, Karen. I mean, someone's called up and said thank you. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's really nice. I mean, to uplift someone's spirit.
And it's interesting because that person would be in a domestically violent relationship. There's no doubt.
Okay, so, I mean, at least that you share,
Yeah.
what can be done
Yeah.
and what happens. But thank you very much. So shall we move on to the building self-confidence in a gender-biased world?
Absolutely. So would you like me to just make some general comments about that?
Yes, please, Karen.
Okay, so I think it's a really important point to make that we live in a gender inequality world, whichever way we look at this, Louise, and it's historical, it's political, it's cultural, it's religious, it's since the dawn of time. I did a little bit of research this morning. Do you know that there's still countries, obviously, in the world where women cannot vote? And one of them is actually the Vatican City, where women are not allowed to vote.
Oh
and women cannot be in
me.
executive positions, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, very
Saudi
much.
Arabia has only recently given women the opportunity to vote. However, in some countries like that, women, for example, if I wanted to go and buy furniture, if I wanted to go and open a bank account, I have to take my guardian with me, to a male, to enable me to open up that account. So when we talk about a gender unequal world, it's out there. When we talk about building confidence, I mean, one of the things I said in the other segment is less than 1.9% of women around the world are in international leadership positions. So less than 1.9. If you talk about building confidence, I think that very much we are disadvantaged in that way. And what I often believe is that many women, what we know from some of the research, are actually fantastic leaders. So we have compassion, we have the ability to see things, and we're different leaders to men.
Yeah.
And I think that we have the understanding of trying to see something from somebody else's perspective. So when I'm talking about building confidence at work, let's say, I think it's about, women being able to, as I said earlier, have the opportunity to think about, what do I do well? What are the things I can bring to the organization? I always love the idea of executive women mentoring younger women. So if you have a mentoring system, often you build up the confidence of younger women.
Right.
And I always recommend a mentoring thing, coaching, all those kind of things. I think giving women the opportunity to try new things, even, for example, putting them into another project, giving them the opportunity to shine. And to, even, for example, if it's on a part-time basis, give them something to run, like a new project or a new division or whatever. But the actual self-belief, the confidence has to be within her.
Yes.
So the three things generally that women face in terms of my experience over many years. Number one is a lack of confidence. Number two is self-doubt. And number three, the inability to stand up for herself and be assertive.
So these three things, if a woman have these qualities, they can conquer the world.
Well, absolutely. If she has confidence
Yep.
and she believes in herself, even, for example, if people aren't agreeing with her, if she's fixed on something that she firmly believes in, she's got maybe some of the research to support that, she stands by that no matter what she does. The second one is, for example, in a meeting. How many meetings do I go to where women don't talk? And all the men will have their say. Then she'll say to me afterwards, oh my gosh, I wish I thought I'd said something.
Right.
And I say something, but I don't know, maybe I'll come across as silly. You won't come across as silly. You've got to contribute.
Yes.
So in organizations, I think we could do more. On the personal front, I think women also need to really, as I say, come back and think about, what do I do well? What is it that, and how do I look? Let me tell you something, Louise, you're always going to have women who are younger, prettier, uglier, fatter, thinner, richer.
Older,
Exactly.
Ageism, that's when
Exactly.
ageism comes in.
And it's all about how you feel about you. So obviously I can't give tips here in terms of as many as I need. But ladies, really think about what you do well. Read books around building self-confidence, learn the art of communicating. And probably the most important skill for women is to learn to be assertive.
Okay.
An assertive example is when you take my car and return it empty, it's called the I statement. I feel really frustrated. Could you please not do that in future? As opposed to what many women do passive, they say nothing.
Yes.
And then they just get more and more angry as things go by.
And then it just all, all
And
inside
and
builds
then,
up. Yeah, that's so
or,
true.
then they get really aggressive. Why have you taken my car? That's not the way to do it. It's to
Okay.
say, I appreciate that you're late. What I don't get is that you brought my car late and with no petrol. I don't like that.
Yeah.
So in the future, what I would like, as opposed to you, blame, what I would like is for you to respect me and to bring my car back full, please. It's about the power of being assertive.
Yes, on Speak Your Mind. I hope you enjoyed the program. Until next week, ni samo demanda.